when you wrote the prologue for Heroine, just to go back there really quick, was that actually the first thing you wrote?
Yeah, it was. And that one was just kind of me messing with my fans a little bit because I have so many people that tell me they're just like, I hate reading. I love and I hate reading a Mindy McGinnis book because I know she's going to kill somebody and I never know who it is. And
Oh, okay.
I have to spend the whole book being like, oh my God, who is she going to kill? And so I was like, well, I know what I'll do. I'll just tell them right from the beginning, this is who dies. And then
Wow.
you have to go through the experience of getting to know them and care about them, knowing that they're going to die.
Episode 93 of the Scheuneman Show is commenced. As you saw last week, we were testing out our abilities to make calls and stuff on the podcast, so we're still getting used to the equipment adjustment and have you hear a little bit of your voice in the background, like just enough to bug you a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was all for a reason. We're really excited to be having our guest that's going to be calling in here shortly. She's an author, Mindy McGinnis, and she's from Columbus. And I just reached out to her because I saw a couple of her books and looked at them online, and they looked really interesting. So I started reading them, and as I read more and more, I started being more and more interested to have her on and talk to her. So that's the guest that we'll be having on here soon. I'm going to give her a call in a second, but I did want to start out the episode by... Well, we'll probably end with that. There's a message I want to say towards the end of the episode, but not right now. We'll save that for later.
Hello.
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 This is Julian, and I'm also here with Marquise. I do the podcast with him. What's up?
Not much. I am just relaxing with my dog.
Oh, what's your dog's name? What kind of dog, too?
He is a Dalmatian, and his name is Gus.
Oh, wow, Dalmatian. It's funny you say Gus. I was texting you earlier about this, but my friend's dog is also named Gus as well. It's interesting. I've always been into Dalmatians. I watched the 101 Dalmatians as a kid.
Yeah.
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 It's a famous one, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I never had like a great urge to own a Dalmatian, but this one kind of landed on me, and now, like, literally landed on me.
Oh,
and
really?
Now we are just together forever.
So Dalmatians are like really big dogs typically, right? Or
So he is not. He's only about 65 pounds because he was the runt, and they weren't really going to breed him. And my sister ended up over at the farmer's house because she was getting pigs for her kids' 4-H project, and they were like, "Do you anybody that would want like a great deal on a Dalmatian?" And my German Shepherd had just died about 6 months before, and so she was like, "Yes, my sister wants this dog." And she texted me, and I was like, "No, I don't." She's like, "Just come over and meet the puppy." Nobody just meets a puppy.
yeah,
Like,
no,
that
I was
doesn't
just about
happen.
to say you can't really walk away from meeting the dog without really just wanting to take it home.
Yeah. And so now he is my, I don't know, like legally, I think we're married. Like that's how he views it anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's the right kind of relationship to have with the dog, I think.
Yes, we are ridiculous. He's literally, his head is just on my lap right now, and he's just staring at me with this absolute just, I love you so much, no matter what.
It's just
If he
complete
was a human, it would be
admiration.
weird. Yeah.
Have you always been a dog person or ever a cat
Dog,
person?
cat. I'm just an animal person. I grew up on a farm, and just always have had animals. Like I cannot, one of my first memories is like picking out my first kitten. Like I just have always had animals around me. And it's funny because I remember when I was really little, we had a dog, and I can't remember her name just now, but I remember her, and I remember playing with her in the yard. And it's one of my earliest memories. And she was just big. Like she was as tall as me.
Yeah.
And I
Plus,
said
when you're a
something
little
to my
kid, I'm sure
mom.
everything feels big, you know.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I said something to my mom. I was like, "Yeah, I remember her, and she was really big. What kind of dog was she?" And my mom was like, "Dude, she was a cocker spaniel."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Oh, I must have been quite small then."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of flip-flopped a little bit myself. Like, I used to be a cat person, but I kind of felt like I needed to be because my brother is, like, like beyond into cats. Like
Mm-hmm.
most people that are cat people don't have cat life tattooed on their knuckles,
Or is
but
there a
Oh yeah.
license plate?
he went all the way and went and did that, and he's got like his childhood cat tattooed on the top of his hand. But at
Oh
least
wow.
they're all quality tattoos, so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not.
Good.
It doesn't like when you look at it at first, it doesn't appear as crazy as it is on paper, like. But so he's super into cats, but honestly, as I've grown up, I've started to realize like I think dogs are just they're just better. Like
I was a cat person all the way, and I don't know. Then I got Gus, and now I'm just like, I don't know. Dogs might be better. Yeah.
so it's a little crazy here because this is our second time recording an episode with the guest not being there in person. So we're getting used
Uh-huh.
to like using this equipment, and it's been a pretty fun experience. And we're glad that we have this tool to use in the future. But I'm still like getting used to like hearing my voice like played in the background. But
Sure.
so just bear with me if I if there's a little bit of a delay or something. But
Yeah, no problem.
so I would like to. These questions won't all be as cliche as this one, but just to like get
Okay.
started, um, do you want to like? So you're an author. Would you like to tell us like how you got started writing, or when you got started writing, or a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions I do get a lot is, did you always know that you wanted to be a writer? And I did. Like, even when I was really little, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know how a person did that. Like, I grew up on a farm. Everyone in my family, and I mean everyone, extended family, was either a farmer or we had a sprinkling of teachers, and that was it. Like, and people that live here where I live, you work at a factory, or you're a farmer, or you work at the hospital or a school, and that's really it. And definitely no one is making a living as a creator of any kind.
Yeah. So you
um
kind of have to break away from this mold.
oh yeah, very much so. And I was in college, so I went to Otterbein, and I was in college, and I was very frustrated because I was majoring in English literature and actually philosophy. And I knew that I wasn't going to be getting an amazing job with those degrees because I didn't have an education degree. And I had been telling myself my whole life, hey, I want to be a writer. That's what I want to do. But I'd never sat down and written a novel ever. And so I was like, hey, Mindy, stop running your mouth. Like, sit down and write a freaking novel. And so I did. I wrote a book. I think it would have been my sophomore year in college. So it was like 18, 19. Um, I wrote what was an early version, actually, of The Female the Species, which is now,
Oh wow.
um, yeah, it's my best-selling novel. But believe me when I tell you that what I wrote at the time had absolutely nothing in common with what I was on the shelf today. I mean, and I mean nothing. Like, it was written for adults. The characters were adults. It was terrible, and that's not false modesty. It was really bad. And I basically just revised that novel over and over and over again. It ended up being published, I think, 16 years after I had the first idea for it.
Okay.
And I just rewrote it from scratch. Like, it just went down to scratch, and when it was time. But that was not my first novel. My first novel, it took me 10 years to get an agent, and I had written 5 novels before I got picked up. And so I spent a long time working um, jobs that didn't pay great. And I was fortunate enough that I did love the job that I had. I was a librarian in a public high
Well, that
school, but I was
fits.
not.
Yeah. That
Yeah, it
fits.
was lovely, but I did not. I made $14,000 a year because I
Yeah.
was an aide. Yeah, I didn't have a master's. I was an aide, but I loved what I did, and I was getting ready to get my master's. I had applied. Well, I was getting ready to apply. Like, I had got my transcripts, and all the things that I needed to apply to get my master's of library science. And that's when I got an agent, and I've just been very fortunate. That was 10 years ago now. So I've been very fortunate that I'm able to write for a living at this point.
So I'm a bit of an idiot when it comes to like the cycle of like how a book starts and then like the life cycle of a book, like where it starts and how it gets
Mm-hmm.
finished to like getting it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how does that work? Like, when you, for example, like you wrote your first book, The Female of the Species, how does that go from being something like you're writing in a journal or a laptop to being on the shelf?
So it depends on if you're talking about self-publishing or indie publishing or traditional publishing, which is what I do. My publisher is HarperCollins, and if you want to be traditionally published, so that is, having a spot on the bookshelf in Barnes and Noble and things like that, you have to have an agent. So a literary agent represents you to editors at the big publishing houses in New York City, and they don't accept like unsolicited manuscripts. So I couldn't write a novel. And at that point in time, because this was like, gosh, when I first started writing, it was like the late 90s, you would literally mail your query letter to them, and you send a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they would send it back, and they literally had these little cards where they would check yes or no. It was like dating in fourth grade. It was awful.
Oh wow, yeah. So they didn't even give you the respect of like a formulated response. It was just like
Oh yeah.
no,
They were
yes.
just little check cards. It was the most demoralizing thing in the world, and I did it for 10 years. But yeah, so if you try to get an agent, and then an agent basically, they have relationships with all the editors at the big houses, and the way traditional publishing works is that it operates on a schedule. They have seasons just like we do, and so any given publishing house will have different arms of their publishing house. So I'm with Catherine Teigen Books, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and they'll have like, they're a smaller imprint. So I don't know, 10, 12, 14 books a season. And they know, well, we know that we want 3 romances for sure, maybe 2 dystopians. Like, so
Okay.
it's like they kind of have an idea of what they're looking for and where the holes in their list are.
So is there any
And
way for you to like figure out what they're looking for before like
nope,
okay.
nope. And you also don't even want to ever do that. So that's
Okay.
called writing to a trend. So writing to a trend is just, number one, it's not smart, because
Gotcha.
anything that's trending is trends die, rise and
Yeah.
fall really fast. And it takes about 18 months to 2 years for a book to go from something that you have on your computer to a book that's sitting on a shelf in a bookstore.
Wow.
So
Yeah, yeah.
any trend you write to will be dead by the time you get it in front of an editor. So the literary agent, they know what editors are looking for, and so they are that little door that gets you in front of editors, and they get, I think, a 15% commission. So they don't make any money until they sell your book, and then they get a 15% commission. And I've been very, very, very fortunate to have a wonderful agent. She recently moved on to being an editor herself. And so I actually have the second agent of my career now, but he's wonderful. And I've been working with the same editor, Ben Rosenthal, at Catherine Teigen for a very long time. I think we've done 7 or 8 books together at this point, which is kind of unheard of in the publishing industry. So I've just been really fortunate to land with people that aren't interested in just like churning. Like, they're interested in relationships, they're interested in my actual career. They don't want to be like, hey, let's make this book a New York Times bestseller, and then you flare out like a comet and we're done with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not typically like it's not really common for people to stick with one agent for multiple books for a long time. It's
Not typically.
okay.
I have friends that have been doing this as long as I have, that are on agents 6, 7, or 8, and I'm only on number 2. So,
Okay.
and I would have been with my same agent for ever if she hadn't moved on to editing. So yeah, I've just been lucky to form like relationships that are really strong, and people connecting with people that are actually interested in building my career. They're not necessarily interested in just pumping as much money as they can out of a single title. They're like, let's make Mindy a household name, which
Yeah.
I'm not, but it's like that's their goal. For me and them, we all benefit.
And that's what you want out of somebody on your team, really, with
Yep.
anything. So, really quick, just one more question about this is like, is it typically like really difficult to get like in contact with an agent, and whether or not it is or isn't, is there any advice you would give to anybody listening that is looking to be a writer or an author, but doesn't have an agent? Like, how would you
Yeah.
recommend people getting one?
Yeah. So what you do, um, you have to write what's called a query letter. And a query letter is about 300 words in which you make your book sound like the best book that was ever written and yourself sound like the most interesting person that ever lived. And you got about 300 words to do that. And you send it out to agents. There's all kinds of databases online. Querytracker.net is probably the best that's still out there at the moment. There's another one that is in the works. It doesn't exist yet, but it's called Authored. That is not available to the public yet, but querytracker.net is fantastic. And they'll keep track of your queries for you and things like that. And you can find databases that have lists of these are the agents that are currently looking for manuscripts. This is what they're looking for. So if you wrote a middle grade sci-fi, you want to find an agent that represents middle grade sci-fi,
Okay.
and you find their email address and you send them your query letter. And agents get somewhere from 300 to 400 queries in their inbox a week. So standing out in, it's called the slush pile. Standing out in the slush pile is incredibly difficult. And everybody gets like real beat down about it. And I mean, that's just the game, man.
Yeah.
Most of us, it took me 10 years to get an agent. The average, from what I have gathered from speaking with a lot of different people, a lot of authors, the average is 7. The average is about 7 years. So it's like, I will talk to people that'll be like, yeah, I wrote my first novel and I sent out 10 queries and I got a bunch of rejections. And I'm just like, yeah,
Yeah.
well, you've started,
That's the
but it's
thing.
just like, that's just the way it is. You have to develop, we call it rhinoceros skin. You have to have the thickest skin because you're going to get rejected. And even when you get published, it doesn't stop. Like, I don't read my reviews
It's really
because,
interesting to hear these author terms, like the little like slang that you guys have.
oh, yeah, absolutely.
So is it a pretty tight knit community when it comes to authors, like working, like not necessarily like working with each other, but like being in contact with each other and knowing
It
each
is a
other?
small world. It is a small world. And so for example, this is just on Monday, I was at Winter Institute, I'm sorry, Tuesday. I was at Winter Institute, which is a gathering for independent books store owners. And it was in Cincinnati this past week. And so Harper asked me to go down and be present at like a dinner where we sat and talked with booksellers. And I didn't know it, but a woman that debuted, so our very first books came out the same year in 2013. Her name's Justina Ireland. And Justina is wonderful. I love Justina. She and I both debuted in 2013 with young adult books.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, and we were talking at the event because we hadn't seen each other in years, but you do cross paths. And we got to talking, and it was really funny because I think so something that middle grade and YA authors will do is kind of band together and form groups, and you'll have a debut class. We literally call it a debut class, and we support each other, and we, read each other's books, and we recommend each other's books to people that we know that would like them, and we, retweet each other's social media. It's not Twitter anymore. Twitter's dead, but you know what I mean. It's like we
Yeah.
do our best to help each other boost our signals. So anyway, Justina and I were talking. Our debut group, our class of 2013, had I think 67 or 68 people in it.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and when I ran into Justina, I was like, "Hey, oh my God!" And she was like, "Oh, how are you?" And we were only able to talk very briefly, but I think only 6 or 7 of us are still publishing in the traditional world. Um, Quite a few have gone on to have luck in other arenas, but I think only 6 or 7 of us are still out in the trad pub world.
The real troopers.
Yeah, yeah, we're all exhausted.
Well, I do have a question. So I mean, I have a lot of questions. It's actually crazy. I'm trying to like sift through all of these and pick out the best ones. But one thing I wanted to ask: is there something that you're working on right now or are you in kind of a period where you're like waiting for the next story to kind of hit you, or?
I'm in a little bit of a downswing at the moment, which is nice. I have a book coming out March 19th, so that'll be my 13th book.
Okay.
And like I said earlier, it takes about 18 months for a book to go through the process of getting to the bookshelf. So I wrote that book in the summer of 2022.
Okay.
So the book that of mine that will be out in 2025, I just turned in on January 15th. So I'm in a nice little valley where I'm waiting on my next book to come out. My 2025 release is already turned in, and I am contracted. So I'm lucky enough that HarperCollins usually gives me a 2-book contract.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm contracted through 2026 at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a 2026 book to start writing that will be due around January of 2020.
Okay, so is the contract like an amount of time, or is it like an amount of books?
So the contract is usually for an amount of books. So it'll be like, this is a 2-book contract, but there is like, a general date that is set, like usually just like a time frame within the contract.
Gotcha.
And then you talk with your editor and like things get moved around. So like my book that is coming out in 2025 was originally let me think about this. I think it was originally supposed to be a winter release, a March release again. And they were like, hey, how would you feel about being moved to summer? And I was like, I would be totally fine with that, guys, because we've tried me in fall, we've tried me in winter, and we haven't tried me in spring or summer. And they were like, hey, let's move you to summer. And I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah,
so,
let's go for it. Yeah.
Things
So you're
are
down
always,
to try something different, see how like the reception you get in a different time of the year, pretty much.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, always.
So does it ever become like difficult to like keep up with the amount of books that you need to give in, or do you just kind of have like a lot of ideas coming to you? I'm not familiar with how many, like for an author, what's it like, how many stories do you usually have in your head or that you're thinking about at once? Like,
There's usually one that's super prevalent. There's
okay.
usually the one that is just demanding the most attention. Sometimes there can be 2 or 3. I typically, if you want to make a living as an author, you have to write a book a year, period. And that's minimum. Well, sorry. You work in the background on other things. So
Yeah.
you publish a book a year. And if you're fortunate to make enough money, you may not have to work that much, but a book a year is pretty common. I am not married. I do not have any spouse or like income coming from another source. Like I am just doing this on my own, and so I write a book a year under my real name. I also write under a pen name with some friends.
Oh, that's
We haven't
interesting.
put anything out in a long time just because we're all really overwhelmed, but I do that, and I ghostwrite self-help, like nonfiction books, under a different name as well.
I bet that can be fun.
It can
Ghostwriting.
be really fun.
Yeah,
It can
yeah.
be really fun. And I run an editorial business under my real name. So it's like I usually got, so like right now I have 3 ghostwriting clients, and that's mostly, I'm also co-writing a book with a friend that we're hoping to get
Busy.
off the ground. Yeah.
Very.
And I got another adult project like in the wings that my agent's hoping to take out on submission. Real soon. So, it's just like I am usually juggling
Yeah.
3, 4, or 5 projects at a time, but it might not be fiction under my real name,
Gotcha.
if that makes any sense. Yeah.
On to a bit of another subject. So, well, recently, I'll start by saying recently I just finished Heroine, and actually just finished Heroine and Be Not Far From Me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Heroine. That story was incredibly impactful, and it was really well done. I listened to a bit of it with my dad actually, and he is he's a retired psych nurse, and he used to work in Mount Carmel, and
Okay.
we were both blown away at how authentic everything was. Like, and I mean, what I mean is like, for example, he said that you did like an amazing job at like capturing kind of the thought process and thinking
Yeah.
of an addict.
Yeah.
And he was just shocked by it. And so I was curious, like, what was some of your preparation going into that story, or like any experience you may have with that kind of subject matter?
Yeah, totally. So I get a lot of questions about that, and I am fortunate. I don't want to present myself like in a skin that I've never worn, so I can't claim that I've ever um, suffered through any type of substance misuse. I am a person that I know my fucking boundaries, and I know how much my body loves downers, like
Yeah.
love them. And so it's like I was given Darvocet when I was a teenager. I had my wisdom teeth taken out,
I'm
and
not looking
I
forward to
was
that, by the way.
oh god, it's not lovely.
I'm
It is
putting it
not
off as
lovely,
far as I can.
which is also incredibly painful. I mean, I get them out while you can. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah.
wish I would have had my tonsils taken out when I was younger. I'm gonna have to do that at some
I did
point.
that
But
when I was a little kid. I don't want to derail you too much, but yeah, the
oh
tonsils.
yeah,
I don't have a great memory of it, but it's I don't know. My memory of it doesn't seem as bad as what I imagine the wisdom teeth is, if that makes any
the
sense.
wisdom teeth are just. I don't know. Mine were deep. Mine were really deep,
Ooh.
and I had braces, and so my teeth were, you know, right, and they were in the right place. And my mom and dad had put so much money into my mouth that my orthodontist was like, let's take them out now before they rise and mess up her teeth that are in the right place. So they were like digging and
Mm.
chipping away at bone to get to
Yeah,
them, and it
I'm
was
I'm in a similar
really bad.
situation. So,
Yeah,
but
it was
one of the things that
awful.
like really just sounds awful is like, I mean, I'm a smoker, so I
Hmm.
don't smoke cigarettes, but like I use a Juul and I smoke weed
Right.
from time to time. So
Uh-huh.
it's I'm not looking forward to pretty much having to go cold turkey on those.
Yeah,
But
that'll be tough.
yeah, it's not going to be fun. But
No.
sorry for the big derailment. But yeah, so we were talking about you just did it so well. Like obviously, my dad has more experience with it than I do.
Hmm.
I have a bit of experience with it myself, but he was
Hmm.
specifically saying how like you just captured it so well.
Yeah, well, I understand I was given Oxy as an adult when I had eye surgery. I had to have eye surgery.
Wow, I had eye
And
surgery too. This is getting weird.
Mm.
yeah, and so it was like they gave me Oxy, and I was in when I talked to teens about it, I'm like, I've had babies, right? This was worse. I was in the worst pain of my life. I always explain it like, if you see an animal gets by a car and it doesn't die right away,
Yeah.
and just the kicking and the writhing, like I was just laying in bed, and there was nothing except pain. It was ridiculous. I didn't have corneas. I couldn't have LASIK. I had PRK, and they actually just take your corneas off.
Oh
So I didn't
wow.
have any corneas. Yeah, it was
It
it
doesn't
was
sound
horrific.
pleasant.
No, it was awful. Like it was truly terrible. And I paid someone to do that to me. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
they gave me Oxycontin, and I took an Oxy, and I mean I knew enough about it that I was just like, well, I don't know if this is smart, but this is where I'm at. Like I am in horrible shape, right? So
Yeah.
I took one. And I think, I mean, it wasn't even that high of a milligram, but I took one, and 20 minutes later, it was, and I mean this literally, it was the best day of my life. Like I was euphoric, and I could still feel the pain. And that's something people don't understand about Oxy is they call it a painkiller. It's not. It just makes you so goddamn happy
Yeah, it's
that
like
you
the
don't
feeling of
care.
bliss. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's just pure bliss.
it's pretty
You don't
insane.
care. Yeah. And so it's like I could still feel the pain, but I was so happy that it didn't matter. And people that have never had an experience with Oxy don't Like, it's so hard to get your head around, but it doesn't. I could still feel every moment of the pain. I was still completely and absolutely miserable, but I also wasn't, because I was so happy.
Yeah.
It was stupid, and I was laying in bed and I was just like, holy shit. Because I mean, I was published. I had the job I always wanted to have. My kids are happy and healthy. I have a house that I love. I love my dog. It's like I was in a good romantic relationship at the time. I was like, I had a great life. And when I took that pill, I was happier than
Yeah.
I'd ever been. And I was like,
It's a
fuck.
couple of things. You start to wonder, like, where has this been my whole life? And then you also start to fully understand how people can
Oh,
really
yeah.
derail themselves
Yeah.
because of
Because
that feeling.
No, absolutely. Because I was like, dude, if I was a person, like, because I mean, I do struggle with depression, but at that time I was not. But I was like, man, if I had, um, if I didn't have a job, if I was homeless, if I had like trauma, if I had sex abuse in my past, if I had something that was just always an albatross or a weight, if I had something I could never escape. And it's like, but if I take this, my life is good. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, okay, so I get it.
Yeah, it's
And
scary.
yeah, it's very scary. And so that was part of my experience. And then I had a friend who was an addiction counselor, and I got to talking to him about it. And I did a real deep dive, and I read a lot. And, I talked to addicts, both recovered and functioning addicts. And, I really think it's important because it is not my experience. And so it was very important to me to do a good job
Yeah.
of making sure that it was clear that I knew what I was talking about, even if it wasn't my experience. And I've been very flattered to have both recovered and functioning addicts reach out to me and be like, wow, you really nailed it. And it's just, that's the ultimate compliment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you did it great justice, and also, I mean, you also did something that I think is really important, where a lot of like movies or other stories will really like mess up with this, in my opinion, where they make something that's about drug addiction or about drugs, and they fail to show anything other than the negative and the horrible parts of it, which
Right.
you show as well. But like when you are making something about that and then you only show it being horrible and depressing and like negative,
Mm-hmm.
it's like people watch this and be like, "Well, I don't understand at all why anybody would get hooked on drugs, or
Right.
how could you be so dumb or naive?" And it's like, "Well, that's because this movie or whatever is only showing you the bad side of this, but there
Yeah.
is a reason why people get hooked on this stuff."
Yeah.
And then, so I think that is an important thing to include.
Yeah. And that's exactly what gets me in trouble,
I
because
was just
I
about to
wrote,
say,
yeah.
I was reading it, or I would listen to it, and I was like trying to figure out like why would this book get any kind of pushback or banned from what I hear. And that's the only thing I kept coming back to, is like, I'm sure that it's because you didn't lie.
You're
No,
just
I
speaking
didn't
the
lie.
truth.
Like, it's a realistic depiction of drug use. Nobody says, I'm going to start doing drugs because I know it's going to fuck me up, right? It's like
Yeah.
nobody does that. We just, and I was a kid, like a little kid in the 80s. And so we had Red Ribbon Week, and, this is your brain on drugs, and just say no. And it was just this absolute, drugs are bad, and people that do drugs are bad, and they will ruin your life. And if you ever see any type of, like you're saying, any representation of someone that does drugs, it's like they wake up in the morning and they've got 5 diseases and all their hair fell out and
Yeah.
they're pregnant with 3 babies. Like, it's
Yeah,
just like
and you
the
never see
day
them
after they
have any
did
kind of
drugs for the
euphoria or
first time.
anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And it's just like, it's so misleading. And so I think, especially for young people, it's like, here's the message: drugs are bad. And then they have an experience and they're like, no, actually, drugs are awesome.
Then they feel like they're
And
being lied
so,
to.
exactly. And they were
And
like, no, you were wrong. And then, boom, doors open and they're going to fall through it.
Yeah, and then
So,
they
yeah.
start to run into the problems with it and the negative stuff that they're so used to seeing. But yeah, when they're just expecting everything to be completely like bad and everything's horrible about this and this kind of person
Yeah.
is the only person that does it, and then when they
Yeah.
experience it for the first time and it's like, well, I'm not that person and that's not how this feels. Like it's
Right.
you're like
And I
maybe
can
I
manage
can
it.
yeah maybe I can mess with this a bit longer because everybody else has
Yeah.
been lying. So is that really the reason why it's gotten pushback?
Mostly, yes. That is the reason people are I get the line that's used the most is that it glorifies drug use. And I'm like, well, the very first line is when I wake up, all my friends are dead. So
Yeah,
it's like,
the like read
you,
listen to the prologue. I don't understand what's
yeah,
glorifying about this.
like literally half the cast dies, and my main character shits her pants in public at one
Yeah,
point. So it's like, no, this is not glorifying drug use. It's honest about drug use. And I don't know. It's people get very upset about, I think, honesty and like truth telling
no, I think
in
you're
some
right
ways.
because it's
Um,
too rare. It
Yeah.
really is.
yeah, it is rare, and it's just we want to put a happy face on everything, and that's just not the world. Like that is not the world, and
Yeah.
we always want to. At least I believe, because like I said, I did work in the public school system for a long time, and you run into parents, and they want to prepare the road for the child, not prepare the child for the road. And they're like, we have to make sure that your experience of everything is safe and clean, and you don't run into anything that's going to upset
Which
you,
is an
or
impossible task.
it's an impossible task. And then they leave the nest of home, and here's the real world, and it's going to kill you, like literally. So yeah, I just think, and books and fiction especially offer safe a safe experience of those things. So it's like, whether we're talking about violence, sex, or drugs, which are the things that get banned, also like being black or gay gets banned.
Does it
But
really still?
oh god, yes.
That's
Oh god, yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want to look into it, it's like the list of books that are getting banned. It's like the highest rate is for like teaching that racism is bad, or that being gay is okay. Like
wow.
those are
So it's really the
oh yeah.
people in charge of this are just archaic. It sounds like.
It is it's amazing. Like most of us are just shaking our heads. So like furries, Heroine was my first book, and I say this a lot. It was my first book to get banned. And the reason why is because I'm white and I'm straight. Nobody was gunning for me, right? I have written books that are way more disturbing than Heroine,
Yeah.
and they flew under the radar because no one was watching me. So then I wrote a book called Heroine, literally,
Yeah.
and
On the
then they
cover.
were like, hey, what is she doing over there? And so now my backlist is starting to get attention, and they're like, oh no, you can't do that. I'm like, well, I already did, and it's
Yeah.
been out there for a while, and you didn't know, and no one was harmed by it.
So now you've
But
you've gotten the magnifying glass on you.
yeah, in a way, yeah, but I don't suffer the way that minorities suffer, so I would never claim that. But yeah, it's
So
it's
what
ridiculous.
happens when a book gets banned? Like
Well, it depends. So it's generally what's happening right now, and what the push is right now is parent groups getting books that they believe are inappropriate out of public school libraries and classrooms. And that's the big push right now. So those books technically are still available in a public library. Those cannot be policed. Uh, and online bookstores, anything like that. The
so
argument is that they shouldn't be in schools. They're inappropriate for a school setting. And when it comes to banning, it's like, I mean, like I said, I did work in a library for a really long time, and there definitely are some. There are kids that aren't ready to read certain things, and if a parent says my kid isn't ready to read this, then they're right. It's like, you're the parent, cool, but you can't say no kid gets to read this book. Like
yeah.
that's not how this works.
See, the crazy thing, when I was in high school, my language arts teacher recommended me a book. It was called Fiend, and it's about an apocalypse happening during people like doing drugs and stuff, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
believe it's going on and stuff because they're high, and I mean that was during school, and stuff. So I don't understand, most.
It's crazy that book would go under the radar and not get banned.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Well,
it's
book banning is just like it's suddenly popular. So
huh.
it's like,
Well, it's
yeah,
different times too, and like
different times.
yeah. So
So it sounds like when a book gets banned, it's really mostly suffering in like the school environment.
School environment, and it's by district, so each district is making their own decisions about how they manage these things. The state of Illinois passed a ban on book banning. It is illegal to ban a book in
Oh
Illinois.
wow.
Like, they were
wow,
just so
yeah.
sick of it. Yeah, Illinois is wonderful. They were just so sick of it, they were like, nope, it's illegal to ban books, taken care of, moving on.
I was worried you
And
were going to say the opposite, like because of some of the violence that goes on in Chicago. I thought like I could see a reality where it's like, oh, we need to get like crack down on bad books that like glorify violence, so let's ban them. But
yeah.
luckily, it's not. That's not the case. It sounds like the
No, they
opposite.
seem to realize that books don't make people kill people.
Yeah, like really, what form of media does? You know what I
I
mean?
don't know. Like, I mean, I grew up, so like I said, like I'm 45. I remember when Dungeons and Dragons was like, if you participated in that, you were a Satanist.
Oh
Like,
wow.
it's just, yeah, that was a real thing. That was a real thing. I remember the Satanic Panic. Like, it was, oh Lord, that was an experience. And it's like kind of the same thing now. It's just people are very, very upset, and there really isn't anything to be upset about.
Yeah, I think it's people who are upset and they don't know what to throw their anger at. But
Yeah,
and
that's true.
it's interesting because I did want to hear kind of some of the things you were hearing like from people giving you pushback for that book, Heroine. I mean,
Hmm.
so it's interesting to hear it because, like you said, it glorifies drugs. Because I went into the book like knowing some of the like backstory of that it was getting pushed back and stuff like that. So I was
Hmm.
trying to like think to myself as I listened to it, like, okay, what do I think is pissing people off or getting it
Right.
banned? And one of the things, like I said, that was like in my head for a possibility is like, okay, is this book glorifying drugs? And I was literally
Hmm.
listening to it with that thought in mind and being like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Like no part of it makes it like sound anything other than what it is. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
One random little question I had
Uh-huh.
regarding heroin as well. Who do you, and if you don't have an opinion on it, that's fine too, but do you think Edith or Patrick is worse?
Oh, I don't know. Like, they both have their own venue. So it's like they're both posing as friends, right?
Yeah.
Edith is lonely. Like, she's just a very lonely person. Interestingly enough, that is something I get a lot of questions about. People are like, really? There's like a grandma drug dealer. But the truth is, so the
It
way when
reminded
I
me of
wrote the
Dope
book,
Sick, if you've seen that.
well, yeah, exactly. So there's a book called Dreamland, and it is about Portsmouth, Ohio, and the kind of the seat of how the opioid epidemic started. And that was part of it, was that people that were on Medicaid or Medicare, I forget which one is for older people, but they had pain, right? They were in pain, and they could get their pain medications for free, but they couldn't necessarily, like, they didn't necessarily have money. Like, these are people that are retired, and they don't have a lot of money, and so they found out that they could sell their pills and make money.
Oh, wow. I
And
didn't know about this free thing.
yeah, so it was, so like Medicaid, Medicare, whichever one covers you after you retire, it's they pay for your prescriptions. And so people that had older people that had legitimate pain issues could get, and this was when Oxycontin was being prescribed. This was late 90s. Oxycontin was being prescribed hand over fist. Like, they were dumping it down people's throats like candy. So
Yeah.
it was being over prescribed, and elderly people would have more pills than they needed, or they were like short on cash, and so they figured out what their pills were worth to younger people that didn't have access to them. So, like, it really was part of how it began,
Yeah.
was older people selling their drugs off. And and I get questions about that. Like they think people are like, that's just ridiculous. I'm like, no, that's a real thing. That's not
Mm.
true any longer. That would have been true in the late 90s. So um, now Oxycontin is finally uh,
It's a lot harder to get.
handles. Yeah, it's a lot harder to get, but almost to the point that people that need it can't get it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of swung the other way. Like I've read stories about amputees that are in tremendous pain and they can't get Oxycontin. So it's as we do, we just went whole ass in the other direction. So
Yeah, it's always got the pendulum always swings too far one direction, and then you just gotta hope
yep,
that it kind of evens out at some point.
that's the hope.
But so yeah, I mean that's the other thing is people who are like, oh, that's not the case. That never happened. Well, that's the cool thing about your writing is that it seems you do a lot of preparation,
Yeah.
like getting into different stories and different topics. You'll like do a lot of research. I don't want to speak for you, but that's what I've garnered. And I was
Yeah.
interested about like maybe like what was the book that required the most research or the most like intriguing research or
hmm
the book that was hardest to research. I'm a bit interested in that.
Good question. So heroin, of course, was difficult, and that's what I always tell people. It's like I have never done heroin. I was like, how am I gonna write this book? So it's like I had to
Because it's like a
do
cliche
research.
cliche question, like what's it feel like?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it was just like, well, but then I learned that Oxycontin is basically synthetic heroin. And it's like, I've done Oxy. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay. Nope. I can absolutely put down what heroin would feel like.
it sounds like it's
Um,
like Oxy on steroids a bit.
yeah, exactly. And so I was like, well, I can extrapolate Oxy. I can write that scene. That's not a problem. So heroin, obviously, I did a ton of research for that. But for, I think it would have been my third book, which is called A Madness So Discreet. It is a gothic historical thriller that's set in the 1890s. It's actually set in Athens at the Athens Lunatic Asylum there. It's now part of Ohio University. But that one, oh man, I researched for 18 months before I wrote a word of that book
Mm.
for so many reasons. It's set in the 1890s, so it's historical. I have to do all of that work.
Yeah,
It
you
is
sign yourself up for a lot of work when you're doing a
oh
timepiece.
God, so much work. It's also set in an insane asylum, and it deals with how the insane were treated and treatments for the insane. And it wasn't always a barbaric, horrible situation. There were doctors and locations and people that were trying to do things correctly. So it's like you got to balance that portrayal. But then there's also a serial killer aspect and the beginnings of criminal profiling. So not only did I have to understand, it was a real tightrope because I had to give my characters who are living and existing in the 1890s enough knowledge of criminal profiling that they can be successful and catch the killer.
But not an unrealistic amount.
Exactly. Like they also had a lot of 1890s they had a lot of things that were just like fucking wrong, right? So
Yeah.
it was like I had to be careful about that, but then I also had to create like I had to backwards engineer a serial killer. So it was like I know what the crime scene looks like, who has created this, like what is this so it's like I mean, and by no means am I an FBI criminal profiler, but it was like the thing is, it's when you're writing something like that, I don't have to convince a criminal profiler that I know what I'm talking about, because the chances that a criminal profiler is going to read the book are slim. They're also like, I don't know, 0.001 of the population.
Yeah.
I have to convince the average reader that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That was fun. That one was 18 months of research. That was a lot. That was that was a lot.
Yeah, that sounds crazy because, like, I mean, you said it, but you were researching a time period. You're researching about, like, like, I'm blanking on the word, but pretty much like how to be a detective, how to be a
Yeah.
serial killer, and then
Yeah.
also about like mental health and like stuff that would happen at insane asylums, like all kinds of subjects that you're having to
Yeah.
juggle. That sounds very intriguing.
It was a lot. It was a lot. And then you can also go down a rabbit hole pretty fast. So at the time, um, so the book is set in Athens, and I had worked out my serial killer. Like I knew who they were, and just because of the methods that they were using, they had to be part of a certain profession.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, great, awesome, right? And I looked up census data for Athens in the 1890s, and I was looking up people that were in this profession, and there were only 2 people in Athens
Oh, wow.
in 1890s that could have been, and it just like they wasn't, and I was all upset. I was like, oh my god, that's so, because then they just got a 50-50 chance. They're just
Yeah.
gonna flip a coin.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not even interesting. And I was all upset, and I went downstairs, and I was just like, oh my God, I've been researching for 18 months, and I did all this work, and I set the whole plot around this one thing. And there's only, I was telling my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, there's only 2 people in the entire city that actually have that job. So it's ruined now. And he just looked at me and he went, you're writing fiction, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. He said, okay, so make the city bigger. And I
Yeah.
was like,
But I mean,
Oh.
it's so cool that you even looked
Yeah.
into that. You know what I mean? Like some authors wouldn't even look into like how many people of this profession were in Athens. Like,
right. And
Um,
I went down that rabbit hole of wanting to be so accurate that I had almost talked myself out of. I was like, I got to redo everything. And he was like, dude, no, you don't. Like, it's okay. No one else is going to look at the census data from the 1890s. Like, I was
Yeah.
looking at maps to
yeah,
figure out where their stores were. And my boyfriend was like, dude, you're writing fiction. And I was like, hey, good point, sir.
yeah. And that brings me on to another question I actually had. It's crazy because I have all these little flags bouncing over my head, like, oh, that was a question, that was a question. But I want to ask this because it ties so well with what you're saying. What's the biggest change, if there have been any, to a story you've made, like in the middle of writing it? You know what I mean?
Not many, because, or not much even. Like, I'm thinking about it. I don't plot, outline, or plan my books. I don't know what's going to happen in my books. I just start
Okay.
writing them, which I know sounds ridiculous when I say that I research for 18 months, but I don't necessarily know everything. And so
You kind of
things
know the
just play out.
environment, but then let the
And
story unravel.
yeah, right. And then I don't have to change things. So I don't usually know. Madness So Discreet is a little bit different because it had to have a little bit more structure just to make things work. But generally, I do not know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just writing. It's called being a discovery writer.
Okay.
I just write, and that's how I learn what happened. And
Well, that's cool.
I enjoy writing that way. It's worked so far. When I was writing my book that comes out next month, I did not know. Like, I didn't know who the killer was. And it's like I was writing and I was getting near the end and I'm like, man, I don't know who did it.
Wow. Yeah, see, so that's
And then,
like a
it
completely
sorted
different
itself
answer
out.
than I
So
expected
I
to
don't
get.
generally have to make changes because I believe that writing in that method means everything happens organically. Like it just can't be quote unquote wrong because it fell out that way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So also, like, because you write organically, I also had this question, like, when you wrote the prologue for Heroine, just to go back there really quick, was that actually the first thing you wrote?
Yeah, it was. And that one was just kind of me messing with my fans a little bit, because I have so many people that tell me, they're just like, I love and I hate reading a Mindy McGinnis book because I know she's going to kill somebody and I never know who it is. And
Oh, okay.
I have to spend the whole book being like, oh my God, who is she going to kill? And so I was like, well, I know what I'll do. I'll just tell them right from the beginning, this is who dies. And then
Wow.
you have to go through the experience of getting to know them and care about them, knowing that they're going to die.
Oh, no.
And so I was like, that was just me messing with my readers a little bit. I was like, here, I'll fix it for you. There, now you know.
That's cool. Because I'll be honest, like I would listen while I was like working, and I'm also kind of a like as far as names, like once I learn a name and I've known it for a little bit, like I can hold on to it. But when it's a new name, I'm really bad at like remembering them. So when I read the prologue, like I remember like, oh, that's crazy, but then like just a little bit of the ways into the book, I had forgotten the names of the people, but obviously
Yeah.
I could do a little bit of like work and figure out like, oh, okay, so that's probably this person, that's probably this person, but like I had completely forgot that I think I forgot about one of the boys being there.
Yep.
But yeah, so I was curious, like, for a prologue, and that could work with like really any story. Like, is that actually the first thing that gets written, or is that written?
Usually, yes. I write linearly. I write from beginning to end, and I usually don't know what's going to happen. I just let that pan out. My book that comes out in 2025 is similar in that it opens with a funeral, but you don't know who's dead. And
Oh
then
wow,
there's three narrators, and it could be any one of these three. And you don't know until the end, like who dies, but it opens with a funeral, so one of my three narrators is going to die.
that's cool. So this may sound random, but it's another question I had. Like, what's your favorite character you've ever created?
Oh, I don't know. That's tough because I mean I enjoy all of them, like even the ones that people hate, like I
Yeah,
enjoy them. My most recent book that is published is called A Long Stretch of Bad Days, and one of the characters in that, the supporting character, is just really funny. And I am known for writing really dark things, tackling tough topics, and going there and, writing about things that make people uncomfortable.
I really do like that, by
And
the way,
Hmm.
about
that's
your
what I
writing.
love to do. And so, but I also I always try to be funny too. Like there is going to be something funny in each book. And for a long stretch of Bad Days, I was like, you know what? This character is just going to be funny. Like all the time, this girl is funny. And so she was easy to write and fun to write because I actually got to flex that muscle a little bit, which I don't usually get to do. And that was nice.
Yeah. So does it ever become like difficult? And I mean, I'm not obviously not a writer, so this may sound dumb to ask, but is it ever like difficult to avoid having like your main characters kind of blend together into the same person, or is that pretty easy to avoid? Like,
It is important to avoid that. You just have to treat them like real people. I mean, would you ever mix up one of your friends with another one of your friends? Like,
no.
probably not. They're distinct individuals. And so it's like you just have to, as a writer, hold them in your head as distinct people. And it can be hard sometimes. So, like, one of my narrators in my 2025 release is similar in tone, or at least she began similar in tone to my narrator from 2024. And I was just really conscious of that. And so I was like, okay, be aware of that. You cannot make her sound too much like Lydia.
Yeah.
And so, you're just aware of it and you do your best to avoid it as much as you can. Now, my 13th book, the one that comes out in 2025 is my 14th. So, I think so far I've done a pretty good job of not replicating anything, as far as people go, but I don't know how long that can keep going.
I mean, it's interesting because I thought of that question when I was still reading Heroine, and then I started reading Be Not Far From Me, and pretty quickly I was like, oh well, these two people are completely different, like referring to the
Yeah.
main characters, and those are both the same readers or narrators. Is that the right way to say it? For like on Leafly.
Hmm.
And I was also wondering, do you pick those people?
So Brittany Presley is the person that reads most of my books. And Brittany, yes, I don't really get to pick them. I have some input. And Brittany started reading my books like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We just like got her on the fly. And I liked her so much. And I got so many compliments. Everybody was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, she's great.
your audiobook is so good. And I was like, okay, like make a note. And so I try to get Brittany every time now.
Okay, yeah, that I really liked her reading of it, and it's also interesting because like she puts like a bit of a like country twang on the voice of the character from Be Not Far From Me.
Yeah.
That I literally am just like, I think I have like a couple more minutes left and Be Not Far From Me. That
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you probably would like to like avoid spoilers. I'm guessing.
I mean, yeah, it's up to you. If you want to
No, I mean
say,
I don't
here
want to
comes a
just spoil.
spoiler,
I
that's
want
fine with
people
me.
to hear this and go check out your books because I mean they're awesome.
Thank you.
And I'm definitely going to be reading more. So, and that's also not just for me. I do think it's a decent question. I need to stop saying that. But what book would you recommend that I read next,
Oh,
knowing that I
okay.
really enjoyed
Um,
both Be Not Far From
so
Me and
The
Heroine.
Female of Species is my best-selling book. That is the book that people talk to me about the most. It's a rape revenge vigilante justice story. And that's my second most banned book, so that would be a good one. Um,
Banning the rape
The
revenge
second
story.
most book.
That's pretty
yeah,
screwed up.
it's intense. That one would be a good move. Also, A Madness So Discreet. Like you're talking about the differences in the characters. What is fun, like for me, if you read A Madness So Discreet, you'll be like, is this even the same writer?
Okay.
Because everything about it is different. It's a historical. I want it to sound like a historical. I want it to read like a historical. I want it to feel like a historical. And so everything about it, the tone, the voice is completely different from anything else that I've written.
It's funny because I actually thought when I was like, I read Heroine and I was like, okay, I had it planned out in my head. It was like, I'm going to read these two books. But then after finishing Heroine, I was like, I like this book so much. I should go back and like look over like all of them to kind of make a decision. And
Hmm.
uh, the two you just listed were ones that I was like picking between. It was Be Not Far From Me, A Madness So Discreet, or The Female Species,
Yeah.
or Female of the Species. And yeah, those sounded really interesting to me. So I just thought it'd be cool to get like a pick from the author. That doesn't
Yeah.
get
That
much
would be
better
my
than
rec
that.
for sure.
So what do you think is well, what's your like writing process like? Is that different from like going from book to book, or do you kind of keep it similar?
I generally have the same approach every time. Things get tweaked, like things change. But like I said, I don't plot, I don't plan. I have a general idea of what's going to happen, but nothing is concrete. I don't really take notes. I just have an idea that's been cooking. Like my skull is a crock pot and my brain is the rotisserie chicken. And it just sits there for however long it needs to sit before it's cooked. And then I start writing. And um, I don't know what's going to happen. And generally, my rule, if I'm drafting, I have to write 1,000 words a day, which is about 4 pages. And that doesn't take me long. I'm a fast writer. So I write 1,000 words a day. And then the next day I come back to it and I read what I wrote the day before. You never start at the beginning or else you'll never finish and you'll keep messing with everything. So I read what I wrote the day before to get back into the plot, remember what's going on, pick the voice back up, and then I write another 1,000 words. So it's 1,000 words a day or 5,000 in a week. So if it's and my week is Monday to Monday. So if it's Sunday night and I've only written 2,000 words, I gotta write 3,000 words tonight, man.
Oh man.
So like that's my process until the story is done. And I never know how long a book is going to be either. My 2025 that I just finished, it kept growing. Like it just kept going, and it got longer. And finally, I was like, "Wow, this book is way bigger than I thought it would be." But this is the way it is. Like that's what happened. This is what the story is, and this is the chronology of how these things happen, and it takes time. And so that is my process. It's that simple. I write linearly from beginning to end. I write 1,000 words a day until the story is over, and hopefully that's before my deadline. And I have a chance to read over everything again and polish it and clean it up at least once. I mean, the goal is twice or 3 times if I can, but that doesn't always happen. And then I give it to my editor, and then my editor he takes it, and usually 3-4 months turnaround time, and you get your edit letter, which is generally anywhere between 6 to 15 pages where, typed single space pages where they're like, these are all the things that are wrong with the book and needs fixed. And it's very painful. But I always know, like, I know what is wrong with the book when I turn it in.
So you can
I
kind of
already
call
know.
it before you
I know
even.
what my editor is going to say.
Okay.
And then when I get it, but it's just like anything else. It's like, you might know what your poorest qualities are as a human, but when someone points them out to you, you don't appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, it always hurts.
So yeah, you get your edit letter and it's always like, oh, damn it. Ugh, and then you're mad for like a week, or sad, like depending on how it hit. But
Yeah.
I
Is
have a
there one that's
friend
more
that
often?
buys a layer cake, or a sheet cake. When she gets her edit letter, you get the email, and she'll get the email. She doesn't open it. She goes down to the bakery and she gets a sheet cake, and she eats an entire sheet cake while she reads her edit letter. And she doesn't like, she's a person that watches her intake. Like, she is not a person that eats sweets very often, and so it's like, that's how she counterbalances it.
Yeah,
She's
it's the
like,
day to let
when my
loose. It'll
edit
kind
letter
of
comes
dull
in, I'm
it.
like, yes, I get to eat a sheet cake.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll dull the pain a bit. Is there a certain environment that you like to write in, or is it just kind of wherever you find yourself?
I'm on the road a lot. I travel a lot. I did 85, maybe 88, I think, events just in 2023.
Mm.
I travel all the time.
Okay.
So I have to be able to write in hotels and on planes and in airports, and like while I'm getting my oil changed. Like, I have to be able to write anywhere. So I can't be a princess. Like, I don't have a spot that I have to have, or a candle that has to be burning. Like, it's just not an option.
What do you think the
So
strangest place you've written is?
in my bed. That's where I do a lot of my I lay down and I write.
I thought that the getting an oil change was,
Yeah,
was a
that would
bit
be.
stranger than in the bed, but okay.
I do a lot of writing in you know what? I mean, that's something that I can't afford one, of course, but it's like, if we ever do get those self-driving cars that we've been promised, I would get so much shit done,
Oh yeah,
because I travel so much. Like, last year at one point I drove to New Mexico. Like, I drove from Ohio to New Mexico for a Comic-Con and back. And
sounds
it's like,
fun.
I could have
Yeah.
gotten so much work done if my car would have just driven.
Oh yeah, that makes me think of another thing. I randomly thought, like, what do you think about what do you think this will do to writing when stuff like, I don't know if you know about the Neuralink or
Mhm. Yeah.
the Apple Vision Pro, for example, like the things like
Yeah.
that. Like, do you see yourself ever using that to kind of help with
No,
writing?
good Lord, no. I wish I didn't have my phone on me all the time. Like, I am highly suspicious of tech, and quite frankly alarmed by it at times. 'Cause, I mean, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay. So I didn't have a smartphone, and this isn't because I was like some sort of I don't know, Luddite or something. I just couldn't afford one and they weren't widely available. I didn't have a smartphone until I was 30. So, like, they didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
And now, 15 years later, I don't leave my house without it. I use it for everything. I use it to pay for things. I use it to take me places. I use it to call. I use it to check
Yeah.
email. I use it to entertain myself. Like, I literally use it for everything.
Yeah, it's like an
And
extension of ourselves. We're slowly
it
becoming
is.
cyborgs, whether we like it
Oh,
or
yeah,
not.
we are. And it's amazing. Like, I will leave the house, and if I don't have my phone, I turn around and I go back. And one day I was like, hey, Mindy, you drove around and had a whole life for 30 years and you didn't have a phone on you. What the fuck are you doing? And I was like, you know what? Good point, Mindy. And I didn't go back and get my phone. And that meant that when I was going to the gym, and so it's like, when I went to the gym, when I got out of the gym, I didn't sit in my car and look at my phone for 5 minutes before I started my car. And I didn't check my text messages, and I didn't check my email, and I didn't look at Instagram. I didn't do any of that shit. And I just went and I got my groceries, and then I drove home, and I didn't have a podcast or an audiobook or music. Like, it was just quiet, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh
How
my God,
crazy.
I'm having thoughts.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Ah, this is scary. I'm scared now." That was my dog yawning.
Oh.
If you're interested in that idea, there is a journalist whose name is Johan Hari, and he just wrote a book called Stolen Focus. And it is all about how our attention spans are getting shorter, our brains are getting less adept at deep thought and flow states. And phones are part of it, but there's a lot of it. There's a lot of different things about our modern lives that contribute to it. It is really interesting. But he also wrote one of the books that I read when I was writing Heroine, which is called Chasing the Scream. And it is all about addiction and the war on drugs, too. So he's just a great writer, and I think you would find him interesting. But Johan Hari, the book about focus is called Stolen Focus.
I'll
And
definitely check
I
that out.
just finished reading it about a month ago, or no, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I was just like, man, I mean, if I had the willpower, I would love to abandon my phone.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure it'd be
I
refreshing.
really think we would all be better humans. So
I'm
no, I'm not going to do
super.
a Neuralink.
I'm no, yeah. I don't think I will either. But then again, there is that little side of it where it. I think its original purpose is to help people who are like paralyzed. Like I think
Yes.
the idea that is really important behind it is apparently the goal is to like give blind people sight, give like
Yes.
handicapped or paralyzed people the ability to move again and feel again. So I think
Yeah.
that part of it is cool, but I'm not interested in having a tablet in my brain. So
No,
that
me
other stuff
neither.
I'm
It's
not.
scary. Black
Yeah.
Mirror all the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. And yeah, I'm pretty guilty of that. Like I at all times almost always have some sort of thing playing in my head.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's a podcast or music. And it's weird because I'll go so long with just listening to a podcast all the time, like while I work or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and then I switch it to music, and it's not great to always be listening to music, but you feel a shift of like
Yep.
mood when you go from like listening to people talking to music. I
Yep.
personally feel like much happier usually.
Yep. Well, and here's the thing. I don't listen to any podcasts. And it's not because I'm sure there's some great ones out there, but I don't I
It's not
mean, what it
everybody's
comes down to
thing.
is I literally don't care enough about other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I don't want to listen to someone that just agrees with me, right? Because then I'm just getting reinforcement. And I certainly don't want to listen to someone that's just going to frustrate me or make me angry. So it's like, why? There's nothing that I'm not interested in that I want to listen rather than read about it. Let me put it
I
that way.
started getting into them because like the comedy podcasts, so like ones that'll make me laugh.
Well, I
But
love Theo Vaughn. I'll listen to Theo
Theo
Vaun.
Vaughn's great.
is
He is
something
a book
else.
character.
Yeah.
Do you think you could write a character like Theo Vaughn?
No, because you never know what he's gonna do.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
literally impossible to encapsulate. Wow, it's funny you bring him up. Yeah, he's
He is amazing. I saw him about, oh my gosh, maybe a year and a half ago. He was in Columbus. I saw him.
I've always
live.
wanted to
He
see
was
him.
amazing.
Yeah.
I've seen like Mark Normand and a couple others, but I have not made it to Theo Vaughn's show. That would be great.
Oh God, he's fantastic, and he's just I don't know. I mean, I could listen to Theo. I can listen to Theo
So do you ever
because
listen
I
to
don't
this
know what
past
he's
weekend?
gonna say. Like he's just all over the place, and he's ridiculous, and he's funny. He does make me sad sometimes, though, too. Like
Oh yeah. No, he
I
gets
think
he gets
he's
really
a
depressing
sad person.
sometimes. Like because yeah, he's not doing great, but
No, he's not.
wow. So that's okay. So that's interesting. Well, I know we're probably running short on time. I don't want to keep you for too long, but maybe I could do like like speed run of like
Sure.
5 questions, and then we can let
Totally.
you go. But I do really appreciate you coming on, and it's
Yeah,
been
for sure.
I could ask you 1,000 more questions, but we don't have the time for that. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is something definitely different for us as well. So it's like really cool and yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So here, let me figure out what these speed questions are. What emotion inspires you or pushes you the most?
Sadness.
Mm.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like what are the books or the movies or things that you carry with you that you remember the most are the ones that fucked you up.
Yeah.
Like things that make you happy are great, but I mean, everybody walks around like traumatized by, well, I mean, I'm a different generation, but like Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows and anything where the dog died. And just like, that's what you remember.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's what sticks with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what sense do you think paints the best picture? Like a smell, taste, sight?
I think that smell is hard to get on paper. In real life, smell is everything. I think,
It's almost like two in one because you need smell to taste.
yeah, you do. I think smell and taste are probably the most difficult to get onto paper. I think that sound, I don't like to use onomatopoeia. So it's like I prefer to describe a sound rather than replicate it. So I think sound is probably easier than the others. Touch, pretty easy. Sight, always easy.
But what do you think paints the best picture? I think I might have missed it.
I don't know. Well, you gotta have all five, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially if you're, well, you don't, because obviously there are plenty of people that walk around without all five and they're doing fine. So when it comes to okay, so for example, I got very badly, very, very badly cut open my arm.
Ooh.
Maybe like 5 years ago. A storm window broke and just guillotined my arm.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I could see the muscles and the tendons like
Mm.
flickering when I moved my fingers. It was crazy. And there was the sight because the wound opened, but I hadn't bled yet. And there was the sound of the glass breaking. Then there was the sound of my blood, like dripping onto the floor. There was the
Hearing
sight of blood.
blood
There
is
was the
not a
smell of
great
blood. There
thing.
was enough blood that there was a smell, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I could hear the blood hitting the floor, and I could smell it, and I could see it. I didn't taste anything. I'll say that. But interestingly enough, I didn't feel anything because I wasn't in pain because the glass was so sharp that it sliced all the nerves
Wow.
and didn't hurt. It didn't hurt at all. So it was just like this really interesting experience where I had this very visceral wound that was pretty bad, and I wasn't in any pain. And so I got to like experience it. And then like I had, went to the ER and they cleaned me up and they were going to stitch me. And I told the doctor, I was like, can you just wait 1 second? I was like, can you just hold off on stitching me for a second? And he was like, why? And I was like, because I want to watch my muscles and I want to watch my tendons flicker because this is an experience that no one really gets to have that often. And it was like, this is important to me. I'm a writer. And he was like, this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me.
I was
And
gonna
I
say,
work in an
he's
ER.
like, "Are
And I'm
you
like, I know, I'm
okay?"
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I think that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I think it probably is different for each reader. So it's important for the writer to provide as much as they can.
What about this? If you don't have an answer, maybe you can come on again at some point, and then we can get the answer then. Maybe when you want to.
I'll think about it.
That sounds
right.
like a good idea.
So, yeah, that's crazy. You're pretty much able to watch the stitching process just because of how unbothered you were from the feeling
Yeah.
of it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Well, and also like the whole thing, any experience that you have as a writer, you're just like logging it
Yeah.
because you're going to use it, And so it was bizarre. It was bizarre.
So, when it comes to covers, like of your book, do you have much like I'm sure you do, but like how much say so do you have in what the cover of the book ends up looking like? Do you
Now,
usually care that much?
typically authors don't.
Oh, really?
Marketing decides what your cover is going to look like. So if there's trends in covers, right? And so they know what's selling and they know what's going to sell. And they will talk to the art department. And usually they make 4 or 5 different covers for every book. They do mock ups. And then marketing kind of decides which one is going to work. And then they show it to the author and they're like, here's your cover. We hope you love it. And if you have feedback, that's fine. But usually it doesn't matter. I was in a different position because I had been a librarian for 14 years. So it's like I knew what covers kids would pick up and what they would put down and things like that. And I said, my only thing. So it's like I don't like the color purple, and I don't mean the book. I mean like the literal. I don't like the color of purple. And but
Ouch.
if purple was selling books, like if purple covers were going gangbusters, yes, give me a purple cover, like whatever.
Okay.
My only thing is I don't, because I'm a female and mostly my main characters are females, but boys read my books and boys like my books. And I'm like, I don't want a cover that a boy can't carry around.
Yeah. Gotcha.
That's my only thing.
So as far as like, so you're not typically like writing a book and being like, oh, I need this to be the cover. Like it's really
Nope,
just what'll sell the best.
never. I'm not a visual person, so that's not a problem.
Okay. All right. I'll just do one more because I am curious. If you had
Okay.
to, well, I'm curious about all these, but
Mm.
if you had to turn one of your books into a movie adaptation, what book would you pick?
I mean, any of them would be cool. Really, any of them. It's one of those things that it does. It's not rare to have your film rights sold. So I've sold film rights to I think 3 of my books at this point. But the way that that works is that a studio pays you and a certain amount of money, and it's not nearly as much money as you think it is. It's kind of amazingly not. And then they have 18 months to begin principal filming, and if they don't begin principal filming, they have to pay you again, and then they have another 18 months, and if they haven't begun principal filming, they have to pay you again. You can negotiate contracts at some point, or they can just be like, yep, never mind, we're not going to make this movie. So and that happens all the time. So I've sold rights and had nothing come of it multiple times, and you just stop getting excited about it. It's just like Christmas by the time you're 30, and you're just like, yep, it's Christmas again, here we go.
But is there
Like,
not one that you'd
you
be
just
most excited to
it's just
see?
not exciting. Like, and my agent is super smart, and she told me after I got off my very first phone call with a film production company, and she was like, hey, I need you to call me back right after we're off this. And I was like, okay. And I called her, and she was like, hey, you're a writer, you write books, you don't make movies, you need to keep writing books and you keep your focus on the path. And I was like, oh, okay, good advice. And it's the best advice I ever had, because yeah, getting the only thing that a movie can do for you is sell more books, and the only thing that I'm capable of doing is writing more books.
Yeah.
So it's I don't have a straightforward answer, because any of my books being made into a movie elevates my visibility, which sells more of all of my books. So
Yeah.
that's just cool. Yeah.
My answer. I can't really. I've only read 2, but I think Be Not Far From Me would be a really cool movie. But
Yeah.
all right. Well, we'll let you go. It's getting late. But once again, I really do appreciate you coming on. And
Yeah.
if you have anything you would like to promote or let anybody listening know about, feel free. And I can also attach your Instagram handle into the description of this video. But
Yeah,
yeah, if
sure.
you'd like anybody to know about anything you've got coming up or anything
Yeah,
like
I've
that, just
got my new book comes out March 19th. It's called Under This Red Rock. It is a murder mystery set in a cavern system, and my main character has a very, very serious mental illness. She hears voices, and it is a situation where it's possible that she may be the killer, and she knows that. And so she is trying to figure out if she's the guilty one, and that's the whole premise of the book. But that comes out March 19th, and I'm really excited about it. Yes, I'm everywhere on all the social media. I'll like tell you flat out, I don't post a ton. I already made it very clear what I how I feel about tech, but I do post, and like maybe once a week. I'm not like I didn't become a writer because I wanted to make reels. Like that's just not
yeah.
who I am. Lots of pictures of my dog, lots of random thoughts from my head, and I will like interact with everyone. Like if you've got a comment for me, like I'm going to interact with you. So it's like that's the thing I can promise you. If you choose to follow me on social media, You're not going to get a ton of shit in your feed because that's not who I am. And if you say something to me, I will answer you. So it's just like that's my jam. That's really it. Yeah.
Okay, well, just because I'm an idiot and I completely forgot, and it plays into like giving you some promotion. I was researching you, and the last thing I promise.
Mhm.
It looked like you had a podcast.
Yeah, so I stopped producing that just this past year. So I have a podcast. It's called Writer Pants on Fire, and it ran from I think 20. Gosh, it ran a while. There's over 200 episodes. It's me interviewing other authors, and we talk about the publishing process. We talk about querying. We talk about writing. I talk to self-published authors. I talk to indie authors, nonfiction authors, author coaches, fiction. I've had some really famous people on there, and it was really fun, and I had a good time doing it. But ultimately, it was like I was hoping to turn it into something that could actually like boost my signal, of course, but also maybe make some money, and that just wasn't going to happen. And you know how much work it takes to make a podcast.
Yeah.
And pretty soon I was like, well, this is taking a lot of time in a direction I don't have the energy to spend. So I'm no longer producing new episodes. I may again at some point. But yes, Writer Pants on Fire is my podcast.
Gotcha. I was just curious about what it was and if it was still happening. But alrighty, well, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful night, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. No problem. Let me know when things go up and I'll promote it and link it and everything.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll keep you updated,
Appreciate you.
For
and
sure.
I'll have DJ
Okay.
email you.
Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty, bye.
Bye bye.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
That was fun.
That was great. I loved it.
I could have. I knew I had a lot of questions, but we literally could have done probably 4 hours based on the rate of
Yeah.
questions that I went through. I have so many fucking questions.
I was
And-
kind of nervous in the beginning. I don't know why, but I was quiet, and I'm sorry for that.
No,
I should
no,
be-
you're
I should be
good.
more talkative. I don't know why, but I was really in the zone this whole episode, especially with all the questions and everything. And I like the amount of like she talked for a minute. You know, it wasn't like you asked a question, yes, no, and then get
Yeah.
on with the next. It was a full.
Here's a secret, Marquise. That's why we're kind of trying to branch off and have some different kinds of people on, because some people that we've had on in the past aren't the best at podcasting. But that's okay. But that's
okay.
what I loved about having her on.
Yeah.
And also, it makes me think there's a couple reasons why I think this, but I'm thinking this episode is going to be one of our higher ones just because I've started to kind of get a feel for what is going to be like a high viewing episode, and this had a lot of those things, like a guest that responds with an actual like response that's not 2 seconds long, and then also I'm blanking on it now, but there was something that oh yeah, like the episodes where like I find myself I probably got through 25% of my questions, and I think that it's kind of
And we have on an hour and 30-minute episode.
Yeah, and I think it's a kind of a good sign for a podcast and a guest decision when I'm interested enough to have all these questions, so interested that I didn't get to get through everything, and I didn't find myself like not knowing where to go next.
Yeah.
And then also, in the beginning, I was certainly nervous as well, but at a certain point, you kind of get a feel. Jesus Christ, I've been holding that in for a minute.
Nice. I gotta piss my head off.
But you kind of get a feel for it and kind of force yourself to be comfortable. But I totally
I
feel
loved
you.
it though. It was great.
For the first few minutes, I was like,
Yeah.
but because we've never spoken before. We've gone back and forth, emailing, and texting.
Not even that. Talking to a writer or an author, you feel like, you know, if you say the wrong thing or say something in a sentence that's not right, you feel like a dumbass. You know,
That's how it was. Another fun fact, and I don't think she would ever really give a shit like that.
I don't think she's one of those that
She
stand
seemed really
it out.
nice, but
Definitely really nice and awesome. So.
that's another thing. It's like emailing and texting her. Like I found myself like trying to use the good like abbreviations
Yeah.
and fucking punctuation and shit and spelling words out and capitalizing the right letters. Like I thought way more about what I was like texting and typing than I ever do with anybody else.
Yeah.
I was trying to put my professional cap on, but
You're like, I got this shit. And then she's like, well, you know, This is all wrong.
Yeah, you're an idiot. I kept like I was worrying like I'm gonna type something so unbelievably like incorrect grammatically that she's gonna be like, no longer will I waste my time with you peons.
This is just I can't. Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
no,
it was
that
great though.
It was
She's
fun.
awesome.
You guys need to. Well, I gotta say, go to scheunemanbrand.com and
Of
check out the
course.
new collection. It's beautiful. But also, you guys
So
need to
beautiful.
check out her books. Like I said in the interview, I've read 2 of them so far, and they're very entertaining. They're great books. Dark, so not for the faint of heart, but they're really good. So I really recommend people listening go.
She said what? She doesn't really write much. I mean, she has funny characters, but not really like a funny character the whole book. What if she did like a full on? I don't know, because she said the new one she has
Like a
a
comedy
funny
book, you
character.
mean?
But like I know you said dark, and that just got me. Like people like dark humor.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm sure the funny character in this book she's talking about, I'm sure that she's making jokes about some dark shit. But one of the other questions I didn't get to ask her, it wasn't really a question, it was just an idea I had. I thought it would be really cool, like if like so she's written what, like 13 books now.
Yeah, 13 is her. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if like in the 11th book a character meets somebody from the 4th book?
Oh,
Like it doesn't really have anything to do with like the story, but
Yeah.
like runs into somebody. For example, the main character of Be Not Far From Me runs into like the character or hears about the character from Heroine.
Yeah.
Or like
That would be
something
actually
like
really
that. I
cool.
thought that would be cool.
Yeah.
Or in another question statement kind of thing like that I had was if like a sketch artist listened to her description of a character and then drew it out, and then she could look at it and be like, okay, that's close to what I imagined or not close.
Oh, like for the
Like,
cover?
okay, so she was writing, if she described a character and made a character in her head,
Okay.
and that's a character in the book. Obviously, at some point in the book, that character is gonna be
like
described
come to life, like, come to
physically or personally. They're gonna in the book the character will be described in some way.
life. Yeah.
So she has some sort of image in her head of what this person is like.
Oh, of course.
So if she went up to a professional sketch artist
Yeah.
who like does like police sketches or whatever,
Yeah.
and then that artist either read the book or heard directly from her what this character is like, and then the sketch artist draws it out, then the author could look at the sketch and be like, "That's what I envisioned, and you nailed it," or like,
No.
"Oh, that's not what I was writing about."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it would be a good idea too, because then you get that perspective and that idea of what they think this character would look like anyway,
Yeah.
as well as what they thought, as the author thought it would look like.
But it is late, and you do have to pee, and you do want my jewel. So
Yeah.
we are at probably an hour 40. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Go into the description. You can follow her on Instagram. Go read her books. They're amazing. Go check out our new collection, the Stone Collection. It is a tremendous addition to Columbus fashion and fashion as a whole. It's luxury streetwear, all with a really powerful story behind it and an inspiration. I'm very proud of the designs in there. I'm very proud of the quality of clothes. Everything feels great to wear. It's just great. So go check it out, and you'll be seeing some more Scheuneman stuff coming down soon. And we're hoping to have some more different guests on in the near future like this. So let us know in the comments how you liked it. Peace.
Love
Ciao.
you.
Love
Peace.
you. Blah.